no, thanks for coming today. Today we're going to chat to you about what really matters. I know we haven't met before,
but it feels like
we have.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about what you kind of maybe you know about me, grassroots communities, and
for me, I believe the grassroots communities is you're a presence that's there to allow people to think about change, but actually activate change, if that makes sense. And I love the work you do because solely the premise of the work you do is around young people. So if you could almost have a reverse trajectory of, you know, these plans, these outcomes as we get older, as professionals, as parents, as however you want to put it, and the main common denominator was the voice of the young person, that's how I see Ben Carpenter. That's how I see grassroots. That's how I see this very podcast. It's about those young people having a voice, because a lot of people turn around and say, oh, you know, these young people want this, but nothing happens. And probably about 90% of the time within the education system and world anyway, that is majority of the time what happens, because people want to protect their integrity, but also they want to protect their roles, their jobs and everything else. What's nice about you is you're raw. And that rawness,
and I won't have a job soon because of it.
but that rawness can be seen as one of two things. It can be seen as, you know, it's raw, so therefore you're getting the truth. But also it can be seen almost as a threat. So people won't directly tell you it's a threat. They'll indirectly tell you because of, very sadly, their own agendas. But the positive thing is you could probably go across half or 3/4 of Bristol and say your name, say grassroots communities to, you know, partners or organizations, and people will know who you are. And that's what's, I think, is very important to Bristol. But actually,
I need to employ you. What a legend. I mean, I never say that because I normally have like met someone or whatever. And that, I mean, to be honest with you, that means a lot to hear someone. And you saying that means a lot because I haven't met you, but what I have seen makes me think, basically, it feels a little bit like a mirror image.
No, I agree.
You have integrity and you do things for the right reasons. And the challenges that you come up against doesn't stop you on that mission, even though it must be frustrating and it must be difficult. You're on the right path.
Absolutely.
And I think within 30 seconds of you walking through the door,
we were just like, what?
That's it.
Yeah.
And that is probably how that's happened. You can just tell, can't you? If people have a similar
your
kind
energy
of
is
vibe.
very your presence and your energy is very authentic, and Dougie's as well. And I feel as though we live in a time now, we spoke about it before even the podcast came on, we live in a time now where our gut feeling is being distorted through facts and figures first. And what I mean by that is that if you can walk in a room and get a vibe of somebody, let's get rid of all the logistics in terms of technology and outcomes based on things that we may feel is the right thing to do. The human connection is very important. So as grassroots says in your name, so your energy is the first thing I read. It goes beyond everything else. It's your energy. And your energy and actually your business name, grassroots, that to me is raw. That is organic. That is adapting to the surroundings. So if the grass isn't watered or the soil isn't watered or nurtured, it's not going to grow properly. However, the intent, Ben, is always going to be there. And the intent is that you're going to keep growing. So that's what, to me, grassroots is. Dougie, made for impact. He ain't playing. But we all have our goal driving force in what we do. Like mine's about authenticity and it's about being simplistic, sorry. Because I think sometimes people they fathom too much information and they want to look correct. Because what you'll notice is that a lot of people don't have a clue what they're doing, but they just want to look correct. They want to feel that sense of, resolve within themselves. And I think in education, you have to be very careful because I call them the greys. And the greys are people that don't care about the emotional heart of stuff. They care about the facts, figures, and outcomes. And it's about working with the greys. I'm not on about the aliens. I'm on about the greys, as I call them, to keep them happy, but to actually teach them. Because each one teach one is a very strong premise. For every single practitioner in education, it should be, what can I bring to the table? But what can I learn from the table? Because I think too much people go out there sometimes and they're very much about, this is my goal, these are my aims. And they're unable to learn things from situations that they're in. So how do we now flip the script and really think about how can we be the best version of ourselves personally? Because everyone will hide behind a professional like stance of somebody. They'll say, I'm a professional and I've got all these accolades. I've got
I mean, but if I threw something and we're cut back to something and we'll come back to this in a minute. But if I said to you that it's probably easier to be authentic and accountable when you work on your own or you work for a small organisation where you playing devil's advocate for someone that works in the education system. If they're in that system and then they find it difficult to kind of shout out the truth, the things that really should happen to make a difference, and they get shot down in flames, what needs to change? Is it them or is it the system?
It's approach. The system to me is something that until we accumulate enough people to have a stance and to make the change, the system is going to always be there. The longevity and the intent is always going to be there. The change is subtle, but that's how we create momentum within education. Because I'll give you an example. I was in care for 16 years of my life, and I had a worker, and the worker was called Mark. I love him dearly, and he's very much the reason I got into education. And Mark would have almost the status quo of the professional boundaries that he would have to adhere to in order to complete his role. But he would do things, and I'm not going to obviously put it on blast here, but he would do things that would ensure that I felt valued and respected and as an individual. Like, for instance, if he had to go at 5, he would say, no, I'm staying longer. And he'd listen and he'd take the time. Or if, say, for instance, somebody had a different unbiased view of me, or a biased view of me, sorry, he would change that narrative within the higher infrastructure of review meetings that was done with myself, not being there. And it's these things is how I believe we create change. We create change by keeping, the professionals as such happy. But when we're speaking to the young people and doing things, we're doing things that's making such a profound impact. We're able then to measure that impact by outcomes to say, I did this, and this is now why John or Beth or Harry, I don't know, has now made this change within their core program in education.
Yeah.
That's how we make the change. Because unless we turn around and we say, do you know what? It's time for a change in the education system, because we've got a very old school traditional.
Victorian, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
100 years.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
And it does, and don't get me wrong, the routine side of it, it can feel a little bit mundane, because if you're dyslexic like myself, and I'm sure that you're aware of this as well, we don't confine in the realms of linear. We just don't. That's just not us.
Which is beautiful.
Which is an absolutely beautiful thing. But
not always.
I've had to, in time, really construct the strand of getting rid of comparison. Because when I was younger, I always wanted to be academic. I never understood the power that I had within being a visual learner, i.e. I could turn around, read something very quickly and conceptualize it. That's why I love media so much. That's why for many years I wanted to be a presenter, because to me it came second nature.
You'd be a good one, I can tell.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It came second nature to me. Do you see what I mean? Whereas now it's about the variable of learning styles in the learners. It's about the variables of storytelling. So going back to the question you asked before, how will I make a change? It's through powerful storytelling. Grassroots is powerful storytelling. And it's simplistic, but it matters. How you allow those young people to feel when they're in your presence and you're their voice, that's how we make the change. It's the same with me, with GCSE Boost and all the other educational personal development workshops that I'm doing in schools. How do I make that profound change? I do it by being authentic.
I get the feeling, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and I get the feeling that this authenticity has come probably from your childhood.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about
Absolutely.
The challenges and the positives that you faced growing up in your community, wherever home was? Say whatever you want to say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I was brought up in care for 16 years, and my narrative and my insight, the more I'm getting older, is starting to change, because I think it's very easy to turn around when you're in a place of lack or in a place of judgment or preconceived ideas or hurt or rejection to be absolutely a trajectory for blaming everyone else. I feel as though my life now, as nearly a 40-year-old man, was one of trials, tribulations, and genuinely it's a very lonely place to be. So the person I am now, and I obviously go into details of the premise of where I've been, is very much different to the person that I was, because that was a place of lack, whereas now is a place of contentment, i.e. meaning I don't need external validation. It's just all about the internal validation. I think a lot of people in care, if they understand that early, they can heal a lot quicker. That's just my perceptive view on that. My mum was actually from around the corner in Knoll.
Okay.
And back in the 80s, it was kind of deemed unreasonable to have mixed race children, I believe. And I would turn around to you probably 10, 15 years ago and say, my mum put me in care and I don't know why she kept my white sister. And I would go on this tangent of hurt. Now I go on this tangent of regard and compassion, because that's a more powerful and profound place to be.
As well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel as though my mum wasn't given the right tools in the 80s, because she had a little bit of experience in care herself. My grandmother wasn't very supportive to her and her children, because we were the actually first mixed race Saunders children. And not only that, I feel as though there was a lot of, not a lot of nurturing for my mum growing up. So she didn't know how to nurture. And I feel as though the closest place for her to position herself to show that she could love her children was by giving us up. Because at that point, she probably thought, I can't emotionally give my children the needs that they need. And not only that, my father was very much, he's got a lot of children, very, very kind of disparate around his kids. And I lived around the corner with my foster mum for 16 years from him, and he didn't come and knock my door once.
Did you know that he was there?
Yeah, I knew he was there the whole time. I remember going to his garage in Greenbank, and I used to stand there looking for validation. He used to give me 1s and 2p's in the money bag and basically
he didn't know who you were. No?
He knew who I was. He just didn't have the emotional capacity to be able to understand his actions. And one thing I'll say is this: when you're brought up in care, as I was, you are usually the first person to always take self-responsibility. But what happens is it becomes an unhealthy habit, because what you look for is that comparison in others. You look for that joint ownership of a situation in somebody else. But because of where they are unable to regulate their feelings. So it goes back to childhood for you again, feeling like you're not enough. Hence the reason I've had so much broken relationships and so many children off of so many women. And one of my own premises now is that I live my truth. So I'm not going to pretend to paint a picture of, who I am or how I want people to perceive me. I just am who I am. And it's something that we can champion moving forward in education, in life, and also in what we do in everyday activities, But education was never something that I constructed for myself as a PowerPoint. It was never somewhere where I felt like I could thrive, because there was too much things going on in my brain. Like, why did my mum give me up? Why am I living with my foster mum? My foster mum is telling me I'm not her mum at 5 years old. This has now regulated my anger, because I thought to myself, well, hold on a minute. You're my mum. I'm not your mum. I'm looking after you. So I imposed on my foster mum, and she was an absolutely incredible woman. I miss her dearly. I've lost her for 22 years. But I remember being 5. But when people say, what's your earliest memory? My earliest memory is turning around and calling her mum and her saying, I'm not your mum. Your mum lives in Bedminster. And I was so confused. But that enraged me at such a young age, because I thought, well, why don't I live with my mum? But I thought you was my mum. And it was very confusing. And I know that she did everything in her power to align me to the best possible outcome. But there was lots of things going on internally within myself, because I think environmental is one thing, but I also think your DNA construct is another thing as well. And I think that needs to be looked at more. And I know scientists and everyone else are looking at different things.
When you say DNA construct, give a bit more of a kind of overview on what
behaviors.
What
So what you'll have, and the first point that made me really look at this was when people had the narrative of Jamaican men or West Indian men love women and they have a lot of children. And I used to hear that a lot at the time. And I used to think, well, I've never lived with my dad, so I'm not going to be like him. Like, that was the one thing that I promised myself, never going to be like my dad, right? But then as years went on, my love for women grew, and I started getting into relationships and having children. And now, before you know it, somebody that I impressed upon not being like, I almost became similar to. And I'm very involved with all my children. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
But my point is, there was something within my DNA and its behaviors. Like, for instance, my daughter.
Is that culturally or DNA or both? Because I guess like if you know, like DNA would be an internal thing, that, you know, hereditary through genetics.
Yeah.
I suppose it's the same thing, but you're seeing it on the outside. You're seeing what pans out in society and things that happen. Specifically talking about your dad as well. Your thoughts about your dad. Do you feel like you were surrounded by people that were living their life in a way that, like you're talking about as well? When you,
do you know what? My foster mum was a single parent. She founded, she was one of the founders of the Bristol One Parent Project that then later became SPAN, Single Parent Action Network, based in Mill Pond. Amazing organisation. I still want to do a documentary about BOP and SPAN. Like, I still very much am passionate about that with Sue Cohen at some point. We spoke a couple of years ago about being a child of BOP. But I wasn't exposed to that kind of life because my mum never had a man in the house. She was very much a single parent to me and my full sister, who she later fostered after me. So there was never those behaviours around.
what about out in the community? Because you said you grew up in Easton, is that right?
Yeah.
Out in the community, what were you coming up against day to day? You know,
it was more along the lines of postcode wars.
Okay.
So knowing that I couldn't go into St. Paul's because I was from Easton, even though I wasn't about that life, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I was about that life growing up. No, I was never about that life. I was too traumatized about my own life to be caught up in any kind of street politics. However, the people that I was around was caught up in that life. So what you had is this paradox of, because I think it happens even now in 2024, people overlap from not being a part of that life, but just geographically where they're from or who they're associated with, they're pulled into that realm when they don't even want to be pulled into that realm. Now, luckily, I wasn't ever pulled into that realm to the point of, you know, I had to carry things. I've never ever carried a weapon. I've never ever taken drugs. I don't even drink. Like, it's just not me. But where I found my vulnerability was within women. It just was. I just love women. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I just do. I still do now, but it's controlled and it's from a healthier place. Then it's not from a place of lack, because I think a lot of men will look for that validation, whether it's because of, you know, parental issues or whether it's because of ego issues. They will always try and get that validation from the opposite sex, or, you know, we live in a culture now, my daughter's gay, so you know, where actually, you know, it could be the same sex. It depends on where that sits. You see what I mean? And for me, it was just about that validation. It was just always consistent growing up. I just always needed validation from women all the time. But the older I got, is the more I realised.
You said you don't think it was from the place of lack, but it sounds like from everything you said that maybe it was that not having that, you know, your biological mum around.
Absolutely.
And obviously, it sounds like you had some, you know, an amazing foster mum.
Oh, she was brilliant.
Which
miss her dearly. Yeah.
Obviously, must have been huge you growing up. But I guess it does feel like that is kind of being a key part of your upbringing.
Absolutely. She was very strong. Sorry to interrupt. That Pearl was a very strong, defined Jamaican old school Windrush.
Well, she done well, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Because, I mean, listen to how eloquently you're talking about the challenges and the struggles that you've been through.
But I also put her through a lot of horrible stuff. Because
that's life sometimes.
You know, growing up, I was very violent. I was very angry. And I always took it out on the wrong people. And then now, objectively, as a big grown healing man, I'm not going to say, you know, that I'm healed, because I think it's an onward journey always. I can look back at that in retrospect and say, do you know what? If I could apologize to her being alive right now and actually say, do you know what? I'm deeply sorry. And I mean that with every core of my being, then I would. And to know that I cannot do that, it hurts, because I feel like she deserves that. So I have to be honorary, if that's the word, in all the actions that I do now as a parent, but also as a professional, because that legacy is energy. It's not nothing. It doesn't need to be perpetuated into some kind of award or anything like that to my foster mum, but it's legendary energy. It's the way I carry myself. It's the way I come across. It's my intentions. It's the way I'm able to view the variables of situations and life and become a more defined and better person for it. That's how I honor her memory now. But when I was 5, I went to a psychiatric hospital. I was assessed because I look back at my care records, and I apparently I would hear voices, and you know, I would act a certain way, where it was called Lambsden Walker House at the top of St. Michael's Hill.
Okay, yeah.
On the left. And I remember they had this padded room in there. I kid you not. They had a padded room in there, and they had loads of teddy bears in there. And I always remember the smell of burnt toast, well, burnish toast, and jam or marmalade and tea. Every time I smell jam and toast and tea,
Takes
it
you
takes
back
me
to that place.
straight back to Lambsden Walker House. And I remember I used to get a taxi there, and I used to go in there, and it was a great place. But I remember when we used to get mad, they used to put us in this room, and when we used to hit and kick the room, it wouldn't matter because it was a padded room. But the way they used to like construct it was like it was a playroom. It was like, ain't a playroom, it's a padded cell.
But
do you know what I mean? But it was crazy.
Kiddy-friendly.
It was mad. And I've always had this battle in education of getting expelled from school, going back to mainstream school, getting expelled from school, going back to mainstream school. I always wanted to fit in. I always wanted to fit in because I felt as though, and this going back to the question earlier, you know, in terms of the Victorian education system, there are some positives from it. It's not about us depicting it.
Your reflection on all this is a massive positive. Everything you said is like, it's obviously driving you forward.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. It's all good, man. This is your show, man. And I think like routine, uniform, that to somebody being brought up in care is everything. Because that's all you want. You just want to feel that validation and that stance, and that you're worth it, and that your self-worth is validated by people just loving who you are. There's not enough love in education. And what I mean by that is that, like, you know, getting people, like when I do assemblies, I get people to look to the person next to you and say, you have value. That's so important. We should be in a society now where we can, you know, to a degree, and I know it's such a safeguarding kind of innuendo, but we should be able to hug students if they're feeling sad without thinking, oh, are they a bit funny? Are they thinking to themselves?
It happened back in the day.
Yeah.
I tell you, I bumped into someone who was a teacher for me a long time ago, who was my tutor, and I didn't have a particularly great start.
Yeah.
Not for me to talk about now, but the point is I bumped into that person, and I was with some friends, and they were like, afterwards, they were like, bloody hell, that's your Ian Wright moment, because there was bloody tears everywhere.
Yeah.
And she used to take me to her house, get me out of school, you know, give you the hug, give you the whatever you need, because they look at you as a holistic person, not because they're worried about how you're going to be looked at about their actions. They're doing something for the right reasons, and that stuff matters. Why do you think that doesn't happen in education now?
Because I feel as though a lot of things happened. I went through, you know, some really hard times when I went to a children's home in Gloucester when I was 11, called the Marlow, and there was a certain individual, you know, he used to physically abuse me, and he got away with it. And the irony is, and I can say this openly because, like I said, I live my truth. It's the same children's home came back to me years later, and that same individual was actually found in bed with a young person, and they wanted me to testify in court, and I said, you know what, you didn't believe me when I spoke. You did not believe me when I spoke, so why should I do that? And again, I was young then, but my point being is that the reason why it doesn't happen like that anymore is because safeguarding, again, has a place, but people are scared because actually how do you measure overstepping the line?
Human connection has a place.
Do you see what I mean? So we're in this, in a generation, we're just in this weird place now where how do we safeguard people but give them the human needs that they really crave? If you had somebody in here kicking off now, right, a young person that you worked with, or say for instance it was me when I was 15, because I always like to speak about myself. If I was really upset about something, yeah, even if you came to me and said, Junior, give me a hug, and my first initial resolve was, no, go away. I'm not in a mood. That would be placed in my subconscious. And really, I'd probably be like, I do want a hug. I need a hug. And then eventually, because I would not see you as a threat, that hug would mean everything to me. And that's where organizations like yours, hopefully what I'm doing with, you know, with Making Careers Happen, GCSE Boost, my apprenticeship log, and everything else that's outside of this construct, it's about that value. It's about just letting young people feel as though they mean something. Because at home, you've got adults that are broken. they're not really understanding the healing process. They're unable to regulate their love for their children. So their children feel unloved. So their children will go into school and start playing up because they get no attention at home. The parents haven't got the right education because they've come from a systematic place of which they could have been brought up in care, abused themselves, or, brought up in a single parent home. So you have this construct of time just going through when actually all of these people want is basic love. Yeah. Basic love. That's all people want. And even if they don't show it, even if you work with somebody and they're like, no, I'm not very affectionate, deep down, they are always questioning that. Where does that belief come from? And usually 9 times out of 10 is from childhood. But everyone's different, and I understand that.
I think everyone obviously is different, and their experiences are different. But most of the time, I've noticed this personally, but I get the feeling from chatting to various people, everyone always looks back at their childhood, don't they? The conversation, when you spend time with friends over a period of time, it always ends up going back to those early formative years. And if you've had challenges like what you're talking about, then obviously that's going to play a massive part in your life. And being able to kind of turn that into a positive is absolutely huge. So, I'm literally thinking if anyone else has been through something similar remotely and listening to what you just said, that might help them on a pathway to healing and coming to terms with things. Because, you could see how it could be held onto in a negative way that could, feed out into your life for a long time. So that's huge. I'm just going to freestyle over it.
It's the best way.
Because I just think there's something in, you've obviously grown up and there's been a lot of heartache.
Loads.
And was there, outside of the home, outside of school, was there any kind of positive light that was coming into your life at that time? Or was it only until you got older that you started to feel...
That's a really good question. I always felt that I was here to move the dial in my genetics. And the reason I keep saying this is because if you look back at my family, there is this habitual pattern going back through generations. Either it's some of my original family members have a learning difficulty, mental health is very prominent in my family as well, both sides. And also, even on top of that, it's like when I was born, I had whooping cough, and I went to live with my birth mum around the corner, and she phoned the ambulance because I turned blue, and actually I passed away and I came back. And I always say that passing away and coming back now objectively, every day I live is a blessing, because actually if you look at it from the realms of statistics and facts and figures and the grays, as I call them, right, then that shouldn't happen. So every day is a blessing. But when I was younger, the moments that mattered to me was the possibility. What if I could do something monumental? What if I could do something great with my life? That's the place I felt most protected. So what that looks like is going to Woodstock School at age 9, saying I'm going back to mainstream school, and everyone's saying it's not going to happen because you've got the most funding attached to you in the whole of Bristol. It's not going to happen. And me believing in myself, knowing that's going to happen, and then it actually happening. So it was the power of my own belief, knowing that the older I've got, it's the more I've realized that the dial's changed. I thought I was always going to be on television. I always thought that I would be a presenter and I'd be up there. And by the way, I was actually originally the 30-second Blue Peter presenter. So in 2004, I beat 10,000 people.
Wow.
Wasn't given the job because I had a criminal record when I was young.
That should have been the reson why you got given the job.
Yep.
The dial.
Yep. And I tell that story now. And again, the positioning and the meaning to that now is, I used to be very bitter about that because I remember going to White City and auditioning with
DBS
Matt Baker.
Anyway, you still get DBS. Obviously, you got a DBS. It's like, what difference does it make?
I know. They just said it would basically change the not the narrative of the show, but it would change the picture of Blue Peter, because
that would be the reason for doing it.
Absolutely. The children's royalty of television. Bearing in mind, this is an establishment, right? That
let's not go there.
No, but I'm just saying, again,
if you want.
It's, all I will say is that they will get on me for, things that I did when I was 14 in a very, very hurt place, a really misunderstood place, right? Like many young people are. They will get on me for having a little bit of a troubled time and not giving me the role. If it was based on talent, I could live with that. It wasn't based on talent. It was based on this. But yet, this is the same organization that actually put somebody in that position that used drugs. I never used drugs in my life. And I'm not judging people that use drugs. But my point is like when people say, oh, you got lots of kids. I'm like, yeah, I got lots of kids. But, there's probably things that you do that I would never dream of doing. It's about the comparison tool. But the point is that people are way too quick to judge. And people change. I'm not the same person I was when I was 14. And I remember it was only up until very recently that conviction when I was 14 for GBH, and when I was 11, it was ABH. I'm going to say it openly because it's not on my record anymore. People, when I was 33, 34 years old, I would have to be risk assessed for something I did when I was 11 and 14. This is how...
It would have been spent.
I know, but it still shows up on your record. So again, if any young people are watching this podcast, my advice to you is stay away from the law, because they'll tell you time and time again, it will go when you're 18. It's lies. It depends on the severity of the crime. So if you do something it was very serious, of course it was. And I paid my dues a very long time ago. But to sit there with someone, and that's partly the reason why I'm self-employed, because actually, my criminal record's completely clean now. But my point is that I remember going for a particular role in education, and I had to sit there with the HR representative, and they went through. So what happened? Why did you have ABH at age 11? I was like 35 at the time. I was just in a very bad place. It didn't stop me from working with children, but the point is, you feel really awkward because it's like you're so away from the person that you was. When they're bringing it back, not only are they bringing it back to where you was at that particular time, which actually, if you wasn't strong mentally, that could absolutely open doors and take you to places that you didn't want to go. But also, it's like, why are you sat there as a big grown man talking about something you did when you was 11?
But surely, I mean, if I think back to employing different people over the years, like, I know, youth work, obviously there's many similarities. Obviously, it's education. But I mean, there's people that work for me now and have done in the past where literally their DBS go... because they've lived a life. And well, it's lived experience. And people go through challenges in life and they make the wrong decisions. But if we're not a society that's going to open up like the opportunity for people to kind of make their own path, following these different things, then what's the flipping point?
Yeah, there's no point.
And you know already, based on everything you said, that it's probably a lot of that lived experience and stuff, which actually means that you can engage with young people better than most of the greys. I'm using your word.
Yeah, greys. Yeah.
Greys anyway, and they know that as well.
Yeah.
So maybe, who knows what it is? Maybe it's just a little bit of inferiority or something,
complex,
or something like that. But I love the way that you say about changing the dial, and what I want to hear about is in your professional career. Yeah. What have you done? And how are you trying to change the dial? Because I can feel the dial just like... It must be so tense. It's like constantly moving.
So I got into education 13 years ago. And when I first came into education, it was by default. It wasn't something I thought I would ever do. And everyone was like, who is this loud guy that is basically holding the audience of all of these young people, giving them certain messages that are not on par or aligned with the traditional Victorian messages of education? And what do we do with this? And I started working for organizations and doing mostly student recruitment. And I noticed that actually there was this real rapport going on between me and the young people, because I could speak to them on a level, I could be authentic, but I could also be very trustworthy. And that's the thing that's very important in education, trust. And I'll speak about that a little bit later on. And I worked for all these different organizations and I just never fitted in. Never fitted in.
Why didn't you fit in? What was the thing?
I think because I was always doing more than what was expected of me. So
surely that's what people want.
You'd be surprised nowadays. Some people just want to stay
quiet. I would love that.
Some people just want to literally tick a box, stay quiet and just keep it moving. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to create something more value. And all the opportunities I've ever had, I'm grateful for, because it's made me the person I am now, even though it's an overused term. It's very true. It got to a point where I was working for all these people, and these people were seeing something in me that I wasn't seeing on myself or within myself. And I couldn't really understand it, because there's a lot of, when you go back to the premise of a lot of education within Bristol, there are probably a few organizations that are reaping the benefits of my work. And I can say that openly because, again, I've got nothing to hide. When they started, whatever they had, it was great. I came in and I completely changed that dial for that company. And they know it as well. And they, deep down, they know that. And I was given a salary, I was given a wage. But when it came to those young people, Ben, I made a difference. I made an impact. But the sad thing about it is that I always felt I needed somebody's validation, which goes back to childhood again.
From what you said earlier,
to say that I was doing actually a really good role. So instead of Junior setting something up for himself and believing in himself, doing the things that he wants to do, you know, involving the people that he wants to involve, what was happening is I was falling under these umbrellas of other people in other establishments and going, oh, if they like me, then I'm absolutely fine. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I was just noticing a pattern. I was working for people, then all of a sudden when I was working for people, it broke down. And the reason it broke down, it wasn't necessarily because of the other people, it was because the dynamics were wrong. I was going in there with pure intent. Of course, I'm not perfect. They had a business idea and their own goals. Then what happened on the energetic level is they didn't align, so it had to disperse, it couldn't work. But along that time, I was building the trust of the learners, and the learners were making an impact, and the teachers were really understanding what I was trying to do, because everything I've ever done in education has always been about value and personal development. Those are the two nuances that I start with. Those are the two premise-like ideas that I start with, and then I move forward with whatever the idea is. And then I started promoting apprenticeships. And apprenticeships for me are amazing, because apprenticeships, I remember always thinking I need to go to university for that validation. No, you don't. If you do something else and get the same qualification, but actually become the person you want to be along the way, this is why apprenticeships are very strong. But the way apprenticeships are relayed is secondary to university. This is wrong, because because university is actually on par with apprenticeships.
It's
and
still
I
that Victorian thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Germany, for example, apprenticeships are up there.
Oh, they're right. They're really, really good in Germany. And that's somewhere that I want to look at as well, because I think it's very important that we can learn holistically from other practices from other countries, because actually Germany's apprenticeship scheme is amazing. I did research on it. It's great. But the point being is that my saying around apprenticeships is a different journey to the same destination. Yeah, it's the person you become. When you pick up the piece of paper, it's not necessarily what's on the piece of paper. It's reflective to how you respond to what's on the paper. And as soon as I started producing these subtle messages, people started to change their perception of apprenticeships, thinking, okay, this is something that I actually could do. And I did that through WTPN, which I absolutely love the work that they do. Alex Richards was very good to me. And, we built, again, it was already there. It was already established. But I genuinely believe, the same with Boom Satsuma, that I took it to another level. And if anyone wants to correct me on that, then please feel free to do so.
You're
but
allowed to say what you think.
absolutely.
Fair enough.
But at the same time, I was well looked after. I'm not, we've not got any kind of, disagreements, but there was always more. So when I was doing the apprenticeship program, for instance, I could see that students needed to know what personal skills were and what transferable skills were, how to get the best out of them, how to really retain information, how to do all of these constructs that wasn't in the formalized delivery of the Ask program. So what started happening is Junior started embedding his way into what an apprenticeship is, allowing people to understand the value of an apprenticeship. And then all of a sudden, the feedback was becoming more and more increased. And then it got to a point, and I was like, I need to do something on my own here.
So for my personal brain to understand it, are you promoting the opportunity of apprenticeships?
Yes.
And you're presenting in a way that is more aligned with how young people think and it makes more difference? Or is it an actual program of delivery that you do and then the opportunity of an apprenticeship is offered?
It's information, advice and guidance. So it's taken the premise of the Ask program, which is, obviously a DFE regulated program, but it's adding my spin on it. So instead of standing there and saying, what is an apprenticeship? An apprenticeship is a qualification you can gain when you leave school. I'll say it's a different journey to the same destination. What does that mean? Okay, there's Ben, here's Junior. We're both meeting at the Northwest Media Center, for example, on the podcast, on the What Really Matters podcast. The way that I traveled here from Loch Lees is very different to the way that you traveled here. Let's say, for instance, from Bedminster. We encounter different experiences.
Did you know that? You're correct.
Oh, nice. There you go. Perfect. Yeah, there you go. Now, this is the point where you're thinking, yeah, Twilight Zone. Energies. That's what it is, right? The way we traveled here is very different. But ultimately, we ended up at the same place. So when we're looking at university and we're looking at an apprenticeship, this is why we say it's a different journey to the same destination. So that articulation of that information is how I would drop it to the learners, get them physically involved. So actually, from a neurodiverse stance, they're physically involved in something. So it's not just me throwing information at them because I'm told to do that.
It's a story.
Absolutely.
It's storytelling, which I can tell you have a skill for. But it's right. It's how you engage people, isn't it? That's the thing. So they would be engaged in the opportunities, and then potentially more people would then start doing an apprenticeship.
That's right.
Then would be through other organisations that you're working with.
That's right.
They then, whatever, that was their income, from that, and that is what would pay you. So at what point then did you go, hang on a minute, I was just about to say Boost, isn't that the name of it?
Oh, but GCSE Boost, yeah.
Boosting, everyone else's kind of intake of young people to go and do apprenticeships, which we shouldn't think of it like that. But I guess everyone has to cover overheads and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
When did you then say, I'm going to step out and do something on my own?
It was about 2.5 years ago. And I sat down and I thought about my life, and it was a part of my healing journey because obviously COVID just happened and there was a lot going on. And I thought, if you don't do this now, you're never going to do it. And at that point, I started to try and do things on my own with the protection of still working for other people. And then I met a lot of blocks then. People didn't like it. Oh, you're working for me, but you're trying to do your own thing, which I completely understand. So I thought, right, I need to become a full-time waiter as what I'm doing now. Talk to people, and I love being a waiter. It's tiring, but I love it. Plug to Miller & Carter. Yeah, I work in Miller & Carter.
Okay.
As well. Yeah. I love doing that because it gives me the sense of freedom. I can speak to people, but I also study people. So a lot of people don't understand I'm probably one of the biggest extrovert, introvert people you ever meet. And it's getting like that more as I'm getting older. And what I mean by that is this. I love spending time on my own. And I never used to be like that before. So in these moments of me spending on my own, I think you need to go and do it. And then the icing on the cake for me was when I worked for a gentleman, and he sold me a dream, but it never came to fruition.
Done that happen a lot.
Yeah, it does happen a lot. And his intentions were wrong. And he was just a very toxic person, very successful person, but very toxic. And the way he would look at me was like I didn't know anything. But what people don't realize is I study everything. So this is why I'm not really on social media, evidently, anymore, because I'm just studying the psychology of it. I'm going, this ain't really aligning with me. I don't chase, I attract. That's what my position in life. I'm not going to beg somebody to be a part of, let's say, for instance, my event next year, GCSE Boost.
Somehow I was attracted.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you see what I mean? And it's and it's that change.
Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
And people make their own minds up, don't
That's
they?
right. And I just thought, I need to create something. So I created Junior Inspiring Education. And that was personal development workshops around apprenticeships and everything else. And that was very successful. And then I went back to GCSE Boost and said, I have to make this happen because I had event management experience. I could see what was missing because, again, I would greet guests or students.
What's
make them
GCSE Boost? Sorry.
So GCSE Boost is my event next year at the Aerospace Museum on the 13th and 14th of March.
And that's your...
Nobody else is involved in this. This is completely mine for the first time in my life.
Great.
And we're looking at 4 main components: diet and nutrition, mental health, motivation, aspiration, and exam techniques for up to 4,000 students. 2,000 will be actually under the Concord. It's a free event. And one thing I will say about this, it's like a TED Talks seminar that you come and you listen to, but also the employers that are there are creating opportunities, but they're there to kind of align with their social responsibility angle, but because they want to be there. They want to show people that they're people behind the professionals, a tagline I'm very passionate about. And GCSE Boost came up 6 years ago because COVID happened. it never happened. Then I thought, I need to make this happen. So I've been behind the scenes for the past year, constructing everything and really going for it with Boost now. And I want this to be my legacy piece. So this is going to outlive me. I want this to happen no matter what. Because again, going back to what we said previously, the Victorian system of education, unless there's a big, big standoff and a big change with all of us, is going to always be the same. What we can do is add suggestible, different routes around that to aid that process.
There's so many similarities here. I mean, this bloody hell, we developed like the year-long gap program, mini gap, blah, 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 basically trying to flip how the education system is put together. Just because there's other ways of learning.
There is. I'll give you an example. Sorry, Ben. I'll give
you an example. No, definitely.
So I had a conversation with a school, and they first of all agreed to come to GCSE Boost, bring 180 of their students. And one thing I'm going to say as well is it's very unheard of for schools to give me their year 11s 2 months before their exams. So the change is noticeable. They're obviously seeing that something needs to change, right? Because you can put students in a room all you want and tell them they need to do their mocks and they need to revise. If that's not their learning style, that's not going to be any use to them. If they're in an environment where they feel loved, appreciated, valued, they're listening to other ways of how to boost their morale. That, I believe, and I could confidently say it, would be more of a help and a useful tool than just sitting them in a room. And the conversation that I had with this particular individual was they wanted to come. First of all, they pulled the students because they said they're doing their mocks. You know, that's the most important thing. And again, it's not for me to place judgment, but it's like, when are we going to change things and understand that like people need people in these times? People need to understand, okay, what are the tips around mental health? What are the tips around my diet? Because actually, when you change your diet and nutritional scale within yourself, that automatically, chemically does something to your brain anyway. So therefore, that's more of a stimulus than sitting down and just looking at pens and papers and books for 2.5 hours revising. It just doesn't make sense. And then obviously motivation and aspiration as well. So it's interesting. But then there's another school that's giving me 2 schools already, because I've got 700 tickets already gone pre-release. I've only got 2,000 spaces for 2 of the days.
I mean, if anyone else is listening,
yes, free tickets. Nobody has to pay anything. What I need is employers. So employers, yes. So employers that actually want to make a social responsibility stance, but they want to do something different. Like I know these big career shows are great, but I've worked in career shows, and actually, where's the value? Where's the aftermath of that? What happens after you collate a couple of leads? Then what? I want to create a brand new way of how we recruit students by adding a social responsibility value to it and actually immersing them with saying to those students, listen, before you come to GCSE Boost, because this is another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to each school complimentary that I'm running, that's coming to Boost, and I'm going to give them a detailed account of who I am, why I'm doing it, and also what the expectations on the day is in terms of interacting with those employers, because they've paid a lot of money for those stands to be there to create opportunities for you, but to try something new. So again, personal skills is very important.
So that, I mean, the thing is that obviously the social value is huge across businesses. It's there, isn't it? There's money there. It's about people being willing to try something different. That's what it comes down to, doesn't it? Are you finding that people are open to doing things differently? Because I know no one likes change, do they?
No.
Until they see it.
They are. Some people won't, and that's all right. It's not for me to be the decision maker there. But some people are understanding it's okay to pay money to recruit students, but to do something else other than recruit students. Because that's all I'm seeing. It's a multi-million-pound venture for many events companies around the whole of the country that go to stadiums, set up careers fairs. And again, it's not for me to judge, but really look at it down the glass lens or through the lens. And you've got year 7 and year 8s picking up backpacks and picking up pens and running off. And it's just a day out with no tangible feat.
Is some of this, because I mean, the thing I'm thinking, by the way, I want to talk to you about something off camera, which would be absolutely mental with some kind of jobs fair involved.
I like mental.
You're like this. Is there any way of, is this specifically targeted to young people from underserved, challenged backgrounds? Is there something? Because this is the thing. Like the people that are going through. Everyone goes through challenges, right? Doesn't matter what your background is. If you've got loads of money at home, mum and dad might be working all the time. You know, you might be from a challenging background where there's no money at home. Mum and dad are there giving you all the love in the world, and everything in between. Is there anything within what you're doing that is specifically targeting people that need that support most, that aren't necessarily following the education system which is set up, which we know doesn't work for everyone? Is there part of your offer which really kind of sings to that? And if there is...
Yes, there is. There is.
Let us know.
There is.
Now.
There is, because it's part of my DNA.
Yes.
So it could not be, because it would be hypocritical to who I am and actually who I'm becoming. However, I am going to say this. So this tends to be a box within the education system, underrepresented, BME, all these taglines that I think have a different kind of energy attached to them. Absolutely 100%, that is my core audience. But I also want to say something else. To the person who's from an affluent background, who has their parents there, a really good, let's say, for instance, support network. When they step into that room, they're going to face the same challenges as somebody who actually is from the ends and has a single parent and actually hasn't got a lot of money. I see the child. I don't see the environment. I just see the child. I want them to feel better about their exams, and actually in terms of what they get in their exams. Because if you get somebody aiming for 6s and they get 4s, I want them to psychologically know that they tried their best and that's all right. Whereas if somebody's getting ungraded and 0s, if they got 1s and 2s, that's also all right. So the event primarily has an aim. Neurodiversity is very important. One of the speakers are actually non-verbal. She's got cerebral palsy. She's in a wheelchair. So this is a collection of all the different learners that we have in that exam room. It's for everyone, regardless of where you're from. So your SEND audience, your multiple complex needs audience, your private students, your mainstream students, your alternative students, because I'm just seeing 16-year-old children that need to feel better. And that's the tagline of GCSE Boost. I just want them to feel better. I don't care about, statistics or outcomes. I don't care about that. I'll leave that to other people to deal with. I care that when they leave that event, they have the same possibility that Junior had when he was a kid and he used to walk around Wood Street in Easton, and when he was at the Marlow Children's Home riding on his Apollo bike for 11 hours, running away from racism at 11 years old from the other kids in the house. It was the possibility. That's my job. My job is to create possibility in the minds of young people, followed by action, because of the feeling that I created from my event that made them think, do you know what, actually, now I'm going to make a difference.
Well, I think that feels like a massive, massive opportunity for people to get involved in. This is part of a jigsaw, isn't it? Like, so what you're saying, is absolutely needed, and it sounds great, and it'd be great if other people could get involved and reach out to Junior. And it sounds like it's interconnected with the work that other people do to create this system that means that it works for everyone. I wonder whether, in your career so far, is there things that have happened that you feel like have been super positive that don't get used as much now that could benefit working with young people?
I would say that we need to get back our youth clubs. I definitely think we need our youth clubs back, but we need our youth clubs back, but like a hybrid version. So what I mean by that is like youth clubs back for reflective practice and space, but also we need a space within that space where people can sit down and talk about their mental health, talk about what they're eating, talk about their home life, an infrastructure that works, that's flexible. If somebody's having a meltdown on the road and they're about to do something stupid, there's a whole support package in place for that. And one would say, but there's no money for it. Money's numbers. Let's get brutal. Money is a control system that keeps us confined.
People don't value it enough.
This is it. So when people say there's no resources, and resources is different. Money is a whole different ballgame for a whole different conversation. So when I hear people in Parliament say, we're cutting costs, we're cutting this, it's numbers. That's what we're cutting, numbers. So what we need to do as a country and actually as best practice for what systems I want to see in place, is we need to allow these spaces to come back. And we need to let the people that run these spaces run it. Let me give you a quick example. So Camilla, who ran Kids Company, who passed away a couple of years ago, she was absolutely brilliant at what she did. But absolutely what happened is the Greys came along and said, you know what? No, we don't like what you're doing, because she might give 30 quid to somebody who needed money and not document it. Yeah? She might turn on and buy something for a young person that needed something in that particular moment and not document it. But all of a sudden, people depicted her character. Actually, what she built for many years, the credibility was gone. Then when it actually came out that she was actually all right as a person and cleared her name, she passed away. That's on the system. That's not on her. And this is what I mean about stepping outside of the realms. It's that human interaction that we need, again, with young people, of saying, it's all right, take the 30 quid. Not, I need to go and ask X, Y, and Z person, and this person, and that person, and that person, before I can actually validate this exchange of money. No, sometimes you just need it. That's what we need again. We need that holistic approach. But of course, as a professional, I will say, because everything has a purpose, we need to safeguard it in a way that it doesn't feel like a process or a routine. It feels normal, but it's actually something that we can actually position the young person and say, we need to safeguard them. We need to make sure they're safe. I get that part of it, but not too, like when you get too involved in it, it becomes robotic and non-human.
I mean, it feels like there's a funnel. Everyone I speak to, like, I mean, granted, a lot of people, they've all worked with young people and adults in communities in lots of different roles, but it feels like the funnel seems to come down to the same thing. And that may change as I talk to other people, but it's like appreciating the need for localized provision, which is there, open, has skilled, localized, hopefully, workers with lots of different talents to support young people in whatever situation they're in. That's open, that's there for them in their times of need. Could happen. It has happened in the years gone by. When I speak to people that are, like 50, 60, that whole generation of people, they've seen that. They talk about that. And I know people talk about things in years gone by with rose-tinted glasses, but it absolutely pains me to hear about how they were able to have the capacity to be able to support young people because that's what they were good at. The government were paying for this. There was, the Nationalised Youth Service. There was lots of money for professional development. People, were continually learning the best ways to support young people. Yeah, there were people that were crap, but there's people that are not so good in every profession. The stories that I hear feels like it's got to be the way forward. I mean, I'm not talking politically because, what's the point? Everyone brings different things. Maybe this government might bring something different, but I suspect because the amount of money it will cost, I doubt it's going to happen anytime soon, but it feels like it's the thing. And having that in every community means that everyone gets that offer. Exactly what you were talking about with your events. And I don't know if we're going to see that happen again. But if we don't, what happens is people like you, people like me, other people out there that within the voluntary sector end up being there, cap in hand, looking for handouts, taking their eye away from the young person.
Never ever be in that position. Never.
Needing to try to then run a business, which isn't necessarily the absolute skills and the reason why most people got into the kind of work that we all do within the voluntary sector. And it takes away the heartbeat of those professionals that hugely make a difference on the ground. So what we're doing is taking away the resource that really matters to people, and it could be those people could be plugged back in where they can make that difference tomorrow if there was something that was a nationalised service, as well as some of these voluntary sector organisations that that run really well and and they're kind of linked up with how they fund things and everything else. If I hear another person say the same thing, it's painful. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's all good. No. It's important. Two-way conversation. We're passionate about the same thing. So,
and a lot of people are passionate about exactly the same thing that you're talking about. I'd love to kind of finish with asking you a little bit about the podcast is called What Really Matters.
Yeah.
Now, I've said to some people, and you just go, big question. But if I said to you, it could be about your own life, it could be about professional life, whatever really matters to you. What really matters to you?
What really matters to Junior Saunders is that, first and foremost, we love ourselves, and we understand that no matter what situation we've been through in our lives and the catastrophic events of our lives, that we have the ability to heal, and we don't need to validate that healing to anyone else but ourselves. And through that healing, we're enabling other people to feel that healing, and they can heal themselves. What matters to me also is the fact that it's okay to be vulnerable and to show your children and any children that you work with that they're loved and valued. That's the most important thing. And it's also okay to show people that you're talented and to show people the light that you have. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And what matters to me is that we're in a time where we can really activate change. And what that looks like is beyond money. Because the second everybody comes together for a collective cause and challenges the status quo of the things that need to change, it's that very change that becomes our legacy piece. So we no longer have to look at history. We are the history in the making for the ones behind us. So to leave that on that note, that's what matters to me. And I didn't write that, by the way. I just wanted to put that down there.
I don't believe him. Brilliant. Passionate. It's hit me. And one last thing, if there was something you could ask of people that might be watching, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Yes. I would like to say, love your children, embrace them. If you've got children or you've got parents, your carers, little siblings, just embrace them, love them. We need more love. Things have become so disparate at the moment because of regulations and social media and all of these things. Children just want love. We just need to love our children more. And even if they push us away and they say, no, I don't like that, it's not for me, them knowing that they're loved and valued. Just love and value children, please. And just do that in whatever way you can. And if you're in a prominent position in life and you're a CEO of a company, love your staff. Turn around and show them the value. It's very easy to pinpoint people's flaws. It's a lot harder to pinpoint their plausible attributes within a company. Show people they matter. That's where change comes in, and that's what I would say to people.
Feels like a good point to end the podcast.
Cool.
Thanks for coming in.
That's all right. Anytime, mate.